Hi everyone, welcome to our first practical for the module Computer Systems, which is part of the Higher Diploma in Computing Conversion at LYIT. So for this practical lab, we need to get VMware installed. So VMware allows us to set up virtual machines so that we can test and run any type of software without it affecting our host or personal PC. So if you have registered successfully, you should go to the Student Hub on the LYIT website and select Software, and then scroll down and click on VMware. So if you are able to get on to the internet, click on Student Hub, go down to Software and scroll down, and then click here under VMware, and you will be given a list of VMware products. So what we want to do is to install VMware Workstation 14. Now because I've already installed it, I won't go ahead and click on that, but let it install, click to select all the defaults, and that should be okay. So once it's installed, you can open up the application. So VMware is a virtual software application that allows us to create these virtual machines so that we can run and test different operating systems without affecting our personal desktop or laptop computer. It's used on many modules throughout this course, and will probably become one of your main software packages throughout this course. So I'm going to go ahead now and open up VMware. So when you open up VMware, you should get a front screen like this here. So what we want to do is to create a new virtual machine. And once we create a new virtual machine, we're given a wizard to follow. So the wizard allows us to create a virtual machine with specific settings, like how much memory do we need, how much of a hard disk do we need, the type of operating system that we're going to install on this virtual machine. So I'm just going to take you through the settings for the virtual machine first. Then we will point the virtual machine to an ISO file, which allows us to download and install a CentOS 7 operating system. So we hit next here, and the limitations are given to what this virtual machine can achieve, so that's okay. I will install the operating system later. It will be, the guest operating system will be Linux operating system, and also it will be a CentOS 7 64-bit, so go ahead and find CentOS 7 64-bit. The name of this virtual machine, I'm actually going to call this Linux Server 1. And we might just put CentOS 7 so that we know the actual distribution that we're using. So the name of the machine is going to be Linux Server 1-CentOS 7. The location of this virtual machine and the operating system will be in under C users Unity documents, virtual machines, Linux Server 1. It'll actually create a folder. This is really important here, that you are fully aware of where this virtual machine will be placed on your system. So take note of the location of the virtual machine. And then we hit next. So the number of processors we will select will be 1, and the number of cores will be 2. This tells us how much memory we want to allocate to this virtual machine. So typically we always allocate about 4 gigs at the very minimum. Normally if we're running high intensive server applications, we might push it up to 8 gigs, but it totally depends on how much memory you have on your own machine as well. So if you're running it from a desktop, chances are you probably only have 4 gigs or 8 gigs. So if you only have 4 gigs, then bring the handle down to 2 gigs. But if you have 8 gigs, then bring the handle up to 4 gigs. What we want to do is to allocate at least 1 gig minimum to your host machine. So your host machine is the machine that's running this virtual application, and your virtual machine is this virtual machine that we're trying to create here. So obviously if you only have 4 gigs of memory on your machine, you can't allocate all of the 4 gigs to your virtual machine. You must give something to your host machine and give some the rest of the memory to your virtual machine. So I have given here 4 gigs to my virtual machine. For the network connection, we'll use network address translation tables. So just click on this and we will return to this on a later date in our course. And select LSI logic for the type of I/O controller. It's going to be a SCSI disk type. This is the type of hard disk that we want. We are going to create a new virtual disk now. And the maximum disk size that we want to allocate, so this will be the size of our hard disk, so I'm just going to give it 40 gigs. It's not going to eat 40 gigs of space on your current hard disk system of your host machine. Basically it will grow to that if it needs to, but it'll only use what it needs. So we will store the virtual disk as a single file as well. And the name of the image file where everything will be stored will be Linux Server 1 CentOS 7 VMDK. And that's okay. So at this point, we're ready to create our virtual machine. So we need just to click on the Customize Hardware and click on the new CD DVD. And then we want to say use ISO image file. So this image file will allow us to install a CentOS operating system. So we need to point our virtual machine to this ISO image file. So when we boot up this virtual machine, it'll actually use this image file to boot up and allow us to install the CentOS operating system. So I have this ISO image under my downloads folder, so you would hopefully have it installed somewhere on your C drive, so it's just a matter of going looking for it and double clicking on that file. And that's about everything. So we have memory of 4 gigs, we have 2 processor cores, we have a network adapter, we have a USB controller, a sound card, printer, display. So let's go ahead and just close this. And then we will allow us to finish the wizard. So what happens is a tab will appear on your VM workstation control panel. So what we want to do at this point is power on this virtual machine. Now, as I said before, this virtual machine is pointing to an ISO file, which allows us to boot up a machine, a computer machine, and install a CentOS operating system. So just click inside the screen with your mouse and then hit return on the keyboard. So VMware Workstation will capture your keyboard and mouse within the virtual machine. And what you want to do is when you want to release the virtual machine, you want to hit the Control-Alt keys on your keyboard to allow the virtual machine to release the keyboard and mouse so that you can use it on your host machine. So we press enter in that screen again, and eventually it starts to automatically check our installation file, which we don't really want it to do, so we can hit escape at that point. So again, just to reiterate, what happens with the virtual machine is that it captures your mouse and keyboard inside the virtual machine. So you click inside the virtual machine, it'll capture your mouse and keyboard so that you can use your mouse and keyboard inside your virtual machine. To release the mouse and keyboard from your virtual machine so that you can return to your host machine, hit Control and Alt keys on your keyboard, and that will allow you to return back out here again. So at this point, what we want to do is we're given the welcome screen, welcome to CentOS 7. This is the installation. So we want to choose what type of language we are going to use with this operating system. So we're going to use English Ireland. Then we click continue. At this point, what we want to do is click on software selection, and we want to choose a server with GUI. We want to choose the GNOME desktop, the server with GUI. We want to choose the email server on the right hand window. We want to choose the KDE, which is a graphical user interface. for this server, and we also want to choose MariaDB, which I can't seem to find. Oh, there it is, MariaDB. And that will do for the selection of packages. So server with GUI, we want at the top, we want an email server, and we want, just click on DNS actually as well, and KDE and MariaDB, and then we hit done. So what will happen is it'll check dependencies on your software packages, and this here, automatic partitioning, will allow it to do an automatic partition, so it'll partition our disks using the automatic partitioning scheme, so which is fine for us. So we hit done on that point. And at this point we want to begin installation. So we'll let this run. It'll probably take about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll return back when the installation has completed. So at this point, CentOS is now successfully installed. So what we have to do at this point is create a user, and the user we will create will be called guest, and the username will be guest also, and we will set a password as password. So PASSWORD, lowercase letters, PASSWORD. So this is a weak password, it's not recommended, but for a test operating system it is suffice, just in case one or two of us forget our passwords, because we have to remember so many passwords. It's better to have this set as an easy password to remember. So I always set the VMs as password, and then we click done, and then we select root password, which will also be password. Now root is the administrator of the system, so anytime we want to do any commands that require higher privileges, we often have to log in as root. I've set the password as password and password again, which is not recommended. And then we click on the finish configuration. So it will go ahead and finish the final part of the installation and configuration, and it will ask us for a few responses in terms of accepting licenses, etc. So we will just have to wait for it to follow through on that. So once it has completed this stage successfully, we then hit the reboot key, and it will reboot the machine. So once it starts to reboot the machine, it'll provide us with a graphical user interface, which we will allow us to enter guest as our user and password as our password. So this machine here now is just booting up inside this window, the VMware workstation window. So the initial setup now is to accept the license. So we click on this and we accept the license agreement, and then we click on done, and then it wants us to finish configuration. We will actually set the network and host name throughout our practical, so we don't need to click on that option. So we just click on finish configuration. and then finally we get our login screen. So we are going to log in as guest. The password is going to be password. So we just type in password. And at this point, our installation is successful. So one of the main places that we will work in is in the terminal screen. So in under favorites, we select terminal, and a terminal is a shell window, sometimes known as a shell window. Apologies. First of all, once we log in for the first time, it will come up with this kind of a welcome screen, and it'll just verify that we are actually using the right language, which is English Ireland. So we click next here, and then it wants to find out if our keyboard layout is correct, which is Irish, which is correct. Be aware that if we select a keyboard layout from another country, then the combination of keys might be slightly different. So it's important that we have an Irish or a UK keyboard layout, and then click off for location services. And no, we don't want to connect to our online account, so we just hit skip. And at this point we are ready to go. So you can see that we're logged in. Just close that window. We are logged in as guest, and the name of our machine is localhost, and we are using a shell window at the minute, which is sometimes known as a terminal. And in here we can type commands like ls, for example, which is a listing of our current file system. So that's it, folks. So well done getting this far, and we'll carry on with the rest of our practicals on Thursday. Thank you.